So when I visited Storyline, it was by myself, actually. And I don't really remember the context, but I think I was visiting a friend and then just went to Storyline that Sunday. And I sat in the back row and no one knew I was coming or that I was there. Like, if there was ever a time when I felt the Lord speaking to me, it was like in that moment. And it really just felt like he was saying, look what I've done here. And even though being a pastor's kid is hard and church planting was hard, like, that really is reward.
Welcome to the Glass House. Today's episode is in response to some viewer mail.
Yeah, we recently got an email and it said, please do parenting episodes. I won't ever be tired of parenting episodes. I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, and I was a pastor's kid myself, as was my mom. I want to lead my kids well through the good, bad, and ugly of their childhood spent in a pastor's home.
So today on the episode, we interview our own daughter. This is a first for us. She's 18 years old. She's now at college, and she's going to talk about her experience of what it was like to grow up in the Glass House, the good things, the bad things, the things she misses, and the things she doesn't.
Yep, that's a fun part. And then at the end, we transition a little bit into, what concerns do young adults have with the church, with the Southern Baptist Convention? And so she had 2 concerns that she said just feel really heavy to her. So we go to that area.
You're going to love, I think, the candor that she brings. She said some things that surprised both of us. And so here's a discussion between us and Ava on what it's like to grow up in the Glass House. Let's talk a little bit about growing up in the Glass House.
Let's talk about it.
I'm interested in if someone asked you, when they find out in college that you grew up a pastor's kid, and they're like, what was that like? What's your answer?
I, probably like most kids, would say there are some really good parts and some really bad parts.
Okay. What are they?
Well, not really bad, but just not so good.
Okay.
Good, I would say it does feel comforting to feel known.
Mm-hmm.
And as a pastor's kid, it feels like everyone knows you. And that is a double-edged sword. But like right now I'm talking about the good stuff.
Yep.
So I think that is a good thing. And we've had good relationships with a lot of people at church. Like, I remember we would go sit in, we as in me and my brothers, would go sit in Miss Lynette's office, and she would give us candy. Joan Toppin, we'll give her a shout out. Miss Joan, if you're listening, love you. And I don't know, she was just super sweet, and she would always say hi. So like, it just felt good to be known and cared for in that way.
And Joan was one of those people that like genuinely cared. Like, you could tell she wasn't just making small talk. She was that kind of person that just sincere.
Mm-hmm. She cared about us. She cared about you guys. She cared about the church. Mm-hmm. So that was very sweet. And I think also because the church felt very comfortable, like almost like another home. Like, not exactly, but we would spend so much time there that we really knew that place front and back. Mm-hmm. Like, we were there riding go-karts before that thing was even built. And then when it was built, we had, like, Mom had her little office. And it's, like, almost like when your mom is a teacher at school. Like, you can go hide stuff in her. Like, I would take food out of her fridge. That's revealing myself. But, like, she had a little office fridge. And
these were fringe benefits.
And Dad had an office. So it was just like, it really was a comfortable place. So that is a good thing.
Okay. What were some of the downsides?
Some of the downsides, the bad part of the double-edged sword, as we were saying, is that everyone does know you. And I think we've talked about this before, but there is a standard for pastors' kids to know more than everyone else.
Right.
It's like in Bible study, Ava's going to be the one to do a prayer. Like, this happened the other day, actually. Just at the end of Bible study, I was asked to give the prayer when no one else wanted to. And I remember this time with the Deaslins, actually. This is so funny. Not that I'm mad about this. This was so long ago. But in 9th grade, I went over to Maddie's house, who's like one of my best friends now. But it was one of the first times I was eating dinner with her family. And her mom was like, Ava, why don't you bless the food since you're like a pastor's daughter? And it was like, and
she loves you. Like, she was genuinely like,
afterwards, she was like, that was like the best prayer I've ever heard. That was so good. So obviously I'm not mad at Miss Noreen at all. It was funny, but I'm just saying it's an expectation that I can pray in front of everyone, and I know the questions, and I have a better, Bible reading practice than everyone else does. And that's not really fair, because just because you're my dad doesn't mean I have to do that. Like, oh, your dad's in finance, so you know everything about economics. Like, why? No one else is expected to know what their parents do, but pastors' kids are expected to know what their parents do. And so it's just kind of unfair.
Ava was talking about fringe benefits of being part of a pastoral family.
Yep.
And just how, in a way, what she was referring to is that she felt like she had a family away from her family. And so, so many stories that we can think of for us personally. There was a lady who worked on staff at our first church in Jackson, and she ran the kitchen at our church. And she knew that every Monday, I believe it was, I brought all the kids up there, and I brought their scooters, and I got one large Pizza Hut pizza. And she would have it set up to where we could come in and eat, and the kids could scoot around the fellowship hall for an hour, and then I'd go home and take them, have a nap. And Miss Alma became kind of like family to us. And she still follows us today because of that.
Yeah, I think everybody has an internal narrator that's helping them interpret the past. And if you look back on the past and find all the bad things, then you can see it as a negative experience. But there's so much good things that your narrator can also bring out. When our kids were little, when you would arrive to the church because you had to come later than me, we had two guys, Eddie Moore and Bob Arrington, that would meet you under the awning in the front of the church and help you get the kids into the church. Mm-hmm. There's that kind of like respect and love given to the pastor and his family that often doesn't get emphasized because of, the challenges of being in it.
Well, and I would give the advice to any pastor or pastor's wife out there who maybe doesn't feel like there's a lot of love. People may just not have a category for it. So if there's something that you feel like is missing, probably chances are there's somebody in your church who's wanting to do that for you. And so what happened for us was just that, these two men saw me trying to carry in 2 toddlers and 2 car seats and just said, can we help you with that? And so, I do think that we get bitter sometimes and people don't really know what's even on our mind. And so to be really proactive to say, I'm having a really hard time. My kids are all little. My pastor husband has to go in early. Could somebody help me? People are endeared to people who need help. And so don't be so prideful to say, well, my church doesn't do this for me. Guarantee there is somebody there who wants to help you out.
Absolutely. The part about the conversation that I wanted to emphasize also was the way she felt pressure to know the Bible. Mm-hmm. Barnabas Piper talked about in the episode with him that he often felt, because his last name was Piper, that he should be the residential theologian for the youth group. And just how much pressure that puts on a kid to have all the answers, mm-hmm. to win Bible trivia in the sword drill. Mm-hmm. I don't know that when we were in pastoral ministry, I thought about that a lot.
Yeah.
Of the impact.
Well, I just think I thought of it a lot being the mom, but I just love the way she said it. If my friend's dad is a financial planner, I don't ask my friend about economics. I wouldn't expect them to know it. And so why do we assume because dad's a pastor that we would have all the answers to the Bible? It doesn't even make sense.
I think hearing her say that makes me more sensitive to the moments when our kids are put on the spot because they're kids of the president of Lifeway and not just kids. And something we all need to pay attention to. For 3 years now, you've not been a pastor's kid. How would you say that's affected you, or what's been different?
I think it is such a relief. And this is super funny, but one of the things me and the boys loved the most about not being a pastor's kid is that we can sit in the balcony. Because for so long,
had to sit in the front row.
Finally get those balcony seats.
No, you don't even understand. When we would go visit Grandmom and Granddad at Christmas, one of the best parts of Christmas and vacation was sitting in the balcony with Grandma and Granddad. Because it was just so different. And we had always sat front right row for our whole lives.
That's funny.
15 years of my life. And then
it's just good to have a different angle.
So it was just fun to we don't sit up front row, and you're not expected to greet people, and you're not if you
stop right there. That's interesting. So you felt pressure to greet people. You couldn't just sit there and be a regular person when you were a pastor's kid. You felt the pressure to work the room.
Not work the room, but a pressure to be friendly, because it is almost seen as that we are a reflection of you. And so if we're badly behaved, that like reflects on you. So if it's like, and it's hard for me because I don't exactly have like a very super friendly, bubbling demeanor. So like I sometimes felt like I had to push myself to like put a smile on my face and, you know, be really pleasant.
How many Sundays did I tell you to uncross your arms? I'd whisper, Ava, uncross your arms. You look grumpy.
Yeah, stop slouching, uncross your arms.
And you're just not a person that like sits there and has a smile on your face. Like that's not who you are.
No. And so it was hard because I felt like, oh, people think Ava's grumpy. Why is she mad? Or like it just felt like all the more eyes were on me than anyone else.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. What do you miss about it?
What do I miss?
What do you miss about being at the church versus being an entity head's daughter? Anything? Are there moments when you feel sad because this thing isn't a part of your life anymore because we're not inside a local church?
Yeah, because we go back to Storyline like we did in February, and you really can, for me at least, feel God moving. And like, I mean, I literally just got Behold tatted on my arm. And like, I feel like at Storyline, you can really behold God's, what he's done. Like,
feel his presence.
You look out in the room and it's like, Behold. And I think I actually don't even know if I've shared this with you. So when I visited Storyline, it was by myself actually, or mom and dad and the family weren't there. And I don't really remember the context, but I think I was visiting a friend and then just went to Storyline that Sunday. And I sat in the back row and no one knew I was coming or that I was there. And even though you weren't pastoring anymore, I looked out and I just really, like, if there was ever a time when I felt the Lord speaking to me, it was like in that moment. And it really just felt like he was saying, look what I've done here. And yeah, I just think that even though being a pastor's kid is hard and church planting was hard, like that really is a reward. So
I guess that's your answer to what the best part of being in the glass house is for you.
Yeah, well, and anytime people would say, we love Storyline or, you know, whatever, it was encouraging.
You're really proud of it.
Yeah, you really are proud of it. Mm-hmm. Another thing that I really value, or another thing I loved about being in the glass house, was how many really cool people we met. Like, people, when we announced we were leaving Jackson, have come with us, like the Simpsons, the Whiteheads,
Cronins.
The Cronins. There's so many more that I'm probably forgetting. But like people like that are super cool, and I've always felt very steady, positive, supportive impact on my life. So that's really cool. And then another one is that, well, this isn't probably something that all pastors' kids feel, but I personally was very blessed to have met Kate Gudeman. We met their family on a mission trip to Belize, like probably 2016, something like that. And she became my leader a couple years later, and we just connected really well, and she's just been such a blessing in my life. And like when we were moving, and we had to hold the secret that we were moving for months and couldn't tell anyone. And I did tell Kate. That was the only person I told, and she never, I don't know if she told anyone, but it never came out, and I don't think she did because I really trust her. So yeah, I was very lucky to have, while in the glass house and being a pastor's kid, so many really great people ministered into my life.
I want to talk about the burden Ava carried in having a secret that nobody else in the church knew, which was we were thinking about taking this call to Lifeway. Often pastors' kids are privy to information that they have to carry the weight of the responsibility of knowing that. You know, it might be that a staff member is about to be let go, or it might be that dad's enduring a ton of criticism from a church leader, but the kid knows that. And one of the things we need to talk about in the glass house is how to manage that inside the glass house in terms of how much should the kids be exposed. I heard a seasoned pastor in Denver one time tell the story about how much he carried the guilt. His kid had walked away from the church. He had grown up and left the church because he overheard so many negative things in the kitchen about people in the church. It caused him to hate the community of Christ. And so how do we do that?
Well, it's so hard because he obviously didn't do that on purpose. But, we begin talking and sometimes they're not aware of our surroundings and kids' doors are cracked open and they hear it. And, for us in Denver, we lived in a very close proximity neighborhood. And so if we sat out on our back porch, neighbors would have heard us. We stay inside and we have, little peeping ears that were always kind of around. And yeah, it gets really hard because there are things that you have to discuss. But then when they overhear it, they don't know how to manage those feelings. And so they begin to think, well, are all church people bad? And of course not.
I remember our master bedroom was near our kids' rooms in Denver, and our son Miles, who hears everything, the next morning was like, what were you guys fighting about last night? What do you mean? Well, I couldn't hear everything, but I could hear some of what you guys were saying.
Yeah.
That's what it's like to be a pastor's kid, is you hear the conflicts that happen in the marriage and pastoral ministry are often related to things going on in the church.
Well, I'm going to clarify, that's what happens in almost every household, because guaranteed every child out there hears their parents. One of them's upset with the boss, one of them's upset with something. But where we have to clarify this is that when we're trying to endear children to the church, and then we're talking about the church members, the saints, that's where it gets tricky.
Absolutely. And if I work at Bridgestone, I don't care if my kid grows up and doesn't buy those tires.
Right.
But if I work at the church, I have a vested interest in making sure that they grow up loving the church and wanting to be loyal to it. There's a tension there that ministry families feel.
Well, and the one thing that I want to point out before we move on is that we were not mindful of how heavy this burden was. So our kids, when we were going to Lifeway, they carried the secret for 2 months by themselves as older elementary kids and middle schoolers. And so, we never even said, are you guys doing okay with that? And so, just be mindful of what your children may be carrying if they're having to walk through a season with you, because, they feel the same emotions we feel. But I just guess I thought, well, they're kids and they're lighthearted and they're playful. And, I wish that we had looked back and done more careful study of what they felt.
We were often unaware of the weight that they were carrying.
Mm-hmm. So we want to change gears just a little bit to continue the conversation with Ava as she shares her concerns about the future and the church. And a verse that came to mind was Psalm 145:4 that says, one generation will commend your works to another. And so how are we passing the baton to the next generation?
And are we listening to the next generation and where they see the gaps, where they have concerns, where they're feeling alienated, and how do we bridge those gaps? Ava is a bit of an old soul. She loves older songs, the hymns, and older people. Where she sees the gap between the younger and older generation is really in two things: diversity and aesthetics. Listen to what she has to say.
We had asked you about, what are some of your concerns for the next generation in an SBC church? Do you have any, I know you do have some other concerns. What would they be?
So I think one of my biggest concerns is about diversity in the SBC, because when you look at the leadership, it appears that most leaders are older white men. And I think that a diversified group benefits everyone because it brings diversity of thought. And I feel like you could just reach more people if you have more background, more experience, just more varied thought, more varied leaders. I think they could just do more. And I think one of the reasons that it's hard to feel connected to the SBC is because none of the leaders look like me. Like, they are white, but I'm also young and I'm a woman. Say if I was in a classroom, like it's a classroom of very diverse people, and they're like, we're going to pick, 10 leaders, and all of them are white boys. Well, all the people of color and the girls are like, what about me? And it just makes you feel like, oh, I guess I'm not valued here, or I guess they don't really see the potential I could bring, so should I stay here?
Do you feel like the gender distinctions that you've been frustrated with are more pronounced in the South than in the West?
Yes.
There's much more freedom for women in the West.
Yes.
For sure.
Why do you think that?
Too.
Why do you think that? I'm interested.
You go
I don't
first,
even
David.
think that. I know that.
It's obvious.
It's because... Actually, you go first. Let me gather my thoughts about it.
Well, I think a perfect example is when we were at Storyline in Denver, and you were having a meeting with all the leaders about a potential youth candidate, a youth pastor candidate. You got a question genuinely that caught you off guard, because the lady asking the question said, you keep saying he. Why does it have to be a he?
Mm-hmm.
And she wasn't rude about it. She was just very confused by it because she grew up in Denver and just didn't have this understanding of male versus female in these roles. And so, I mean, I think I never really see you caught off guard on questions, but I think you were kind of like, and you know, that's a controversial topic, but I mean, the fact that she asked that was very telling of the area.
Well, there was just no preconceived idea of what a pastor's wife should be in Denver. Like, there wasn't a category of like, because you're a pastor's wife, these 5 things should be true. But it's very different. The expectations are different here.
Yes. Another concern I have is about the difference in aesthetics between the older generation of people and a younger generation. I think older people like more peaceful, quiet worship, and younger people like, you know, loud, fun music with like your electric guitars and drums and whatever. And I think it's just hard because there's such a difference and there's judgment on both sides. And I'm concerned because young people think, oh, old people's worship's so boring and I just could never do that. I'd fall asleep. And older people think the young people's worship is just not real. It's so ingenuine. It's like a concert. They're not even worshiping. And I think it's hard because they're both forms of worship, like jumping up and dancing and also like reverently singing are both types of worship. I think it's just hard because there's kind of misunderstanding on both sides.
It's interesting coming from you because you're a bit of an old soul with music. As you're driving down the road, you don't listen to loud, rocking it out music.
But I'm thinking, the thing is, you think about a Fuge Camp or a Passion, the things that people get really into is like the loud, fun stuff. And so I think that if a church only has older hymns, how are you going to attract a younger generation? You know?
We would always say at Storyline, like, everyone needs an on-ramp. And so to do a little bit of a hybrid model of both is always helpful to make everyone feel included as far as here's a more modern song and here's an older song. And they can be done well. I mean, you were saying one of your favorite songs is a hymn done by
Maverick City Music's cover of the Doxology, which is obviously a very old song, but it's still similarly very slow and peaceful, but it's been redone. And I don't know, I was just thinking of this quote from Little Women, great movie, and it says...
I'm sure you've only seen it 27 times this week.
It says, Meg tells Joe, she says, just because my dreams are different than yours doesn't make them less important. And this isn't about dreams, like we're talking about worship and energy, but just because they're different doesn't make one of them better or right. Like, I don't think there's a right way to do it. I just think if you want to keep a younger crowd coming to your church, there's going to have to be changes. So that is concerning.
Okay.
And then the aesthetics. I mean, you've talked about that before.
Just the way the room feels, not just the volume of the music, but the decorations on the wall.
Well, I think
carpet.
If I walk into a church and it's got like deep violet carpet and like a baptismal and like a wooden cross, like it's probably smelling a little musty, first of all, and it's probably old.
What's wrong with old? Like, seriously, what's wrong with old?
How does that stop you from worshiping?
Yeah.
I mean,
what's that have to do with anything?
That's what the question is for the older generation is, how does that affect you, like a current 18-year-old?
Well, because I just think it feels really outdated. And I know that shouldn't distract you from your worship, but it does, I think.
Why does it distract you?
And it distracts the boys, too. Because, like, if we visit an older church, you know they're going to talk more about that than the worship.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't really explain it. I guess younger people just value looks and aesthetics more. And I think you talked about a study that proved that was true.
Yeah, there was a study done of why young people purchase products. And 7 out of 10 young people said it was because of design. They chose that product because of the way it was designed. So the look and feel of products is just as important as what's inside or how it functions, how it feels.
Yeah, and I just think older churches, it just feels outdated and like a church of the past. And I think another part that goes along with this is because how often do you see an old church like that with young people? The old church is usually going along with old people. And if I walked into a church, I'm like, say I'm in Knoxville in a couple months, and I'm looking at a church and I walk in and it is velvet carpet and no one under the age of 50. Like, that doesn't feel relevant to me, and it doesn't feel like something I can really get involved in.
Because you don't think it's going to be around in 20 years.
I don't think it's going to be around. And like how many other, like I think community is important and how many other young people are going to be there.
Yeah.
As Ava was sharing that, it made me think about Carrie Newhoff's blog. And we are interviewing Carrie in the next couple of weeks, and so we're excited about that interview. But Ben, share what it says.
Yeah, the blog is about the signs that your church is designed to reach the unchurched. And the number one sign that Carrie lists is that your main worship service is attractive to your teenagers. I thought that was fascinating. And what Ava is describing here is a culture where there's multi-generational worship, but there is an intentional desire to reach the younger generation. And there seems to be a lack of that in many churches today, which is why we're seeing younger people leave the church.
Well, the thing that we're seeing is that growing churches are listening carefully to the needs and the heart of the rising generation, and they're willing to put some of their preferences aside. I think that's the thing, is that churches sometimes are getting so staunch that they're not willing to put some of them aside. Because it's kind of like you said. I mean, Ava's favorite song right now is a new version of the doxology. I think that there's a rising generation that they do appreciate the older things, but there are some things that they don't understand or they don't appreciate. And so we just have to become like mindful that little tweaks here and there would make a big difference.
And what we've heard from her loud and clear is that she does not want a church where it's all people her age, where it's all people under 30. She wants a multi-generational church where there are older mentors, but she wants to know that generation is interested in reaching the younger generation. There's a sensitivity to it.
Well, and I like the word you use, sensitivity, because one thing that she talked about that we probably won't air is just even her generation really cares about climate control and things like that I think sometimes older generations kind of laugh at and think, oh, this younger generation's silly about that. But if they just felt respected in that way, I think it would go so far.
And we are seeing churches really become more in tune with the younger generation, and those are the churches that are reaching them.
So as we wrap up, I think the thing that is so encouraging to us, and we hope is encouraging to you as you guys raise little ones in the glass house, is that now that Ava is in college, the most special time of our week, every week, is when she calls us and tells us about what church she visited. And it's just the fact that she is visiting them. Every Sunday she's visiting. She's not running from the church. She's not trying to avoid it. She's calling to tell us, like, what should I think about this?
She continues to be passionate about the church. She's not given up on the church. And despite its flaws, because the church is not perfect, she continues to invest in it and hopes in the future of it. So I hope it's encouraging to you that as you raise kids in the glass house, that with all the things they see and all the problems in the church, at the end of the day, it is the most beautiful body and community that can be found on planet Earth. It blesses my soul to see her hunger for the body of Christ now that she's on a college campus, removed from older figures and mentors and the diversity of people that are found in the local church. Seeing the passion she has to find the right church and to get involved is one of the signs that we've done at least some things right with Ava. I hope that encourages you today as you continue to try to raise your kids inside your glass house.
Thank you so much for listening. If you're enjoying the podcast, would you consider leaving us a rating or a review wherever you listen to the show? It gives us insight into what you like, and it helps others find the show as well. The Glass House is hosted by Lifeway, produced and edited by Angie Elkins Media, original music by Robert Elkins, sound engineering by Dale Sandberg, and artwork by Cameron Spooner.